What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, and the Aprilia Tuono 660 is the best street motorcycle ever made. And with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Okay, so obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit about the Tuono 660 here, but only slightly. The Tuono is a phenomenal street bike, and for 99% of riders out there, this might actually be the perfect motorcycle. Now, I'm gonna skip the long-worded preamble, and we're just gonna dive right into some twisty road stuff because I am itching to get out and see what this bike's capable of.
This is where the Tuono shines, man. Oh, man. So, like I said in the intro, part of the reason why I wanted to ride this is because I rode the RS 660, and wow, did that feel good. But anybody who knows anything about Aprilia can look at an Aprilia and be like, okay, so the Tuono is the RS 660, or the RS platform, but with a handlebar and slightly chopped fairings. And honestly, that's a pretty good assessment. You know, there's some differentiation in the SKUs in terms of the way that the engine is managed and some of that, but especially in the RS 660 platform, a lot of the technology that's present on the RS is here in the Tuono, and that makes this thing a twisty road weapon. You can really get after it if you want on this thing, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I currently have it in the individual mode. I went in and set up a lot of the parameters exactly the way that I want it, which is really awesome that you can do that. Oh man, going through the twisty roads on this is going to be hard for me to stay focused because it's just so awesome. First thing I want to start out with is the engine and the power delivery. So it's phenomenal in this. It's really, really great. It definitely likes to sing, so the more you have it in the upper limits of the power band, the better. It's not that it feels bad down low, it feels fine. It just feels better when you're really getting after it. Another thing that's super enjoyable about this motor is the sound. One of the things that I like to say about these RS 660, Tuono 660 platform bikes is it's basically half the V4. So it has a lot of the character of the V4, but in the parallel twin. It's got that same sort of growl and sizzling, screaming top end in the exhaust note. And once you put a pipe on these, holy cow, do they feel good. Well, they feel good, but they sound great. Another thing that's great, and it's a great pair with this motor, is the brakes. The brakes on this, the front brake feel, I actually got on it and I was like, whoa, that's really potent. It's really, really potent. Almost aggressively so, but that's kind of cool considering, you know, the market that this thing's going for, the place that it's playing in. We're dealing with a really nice Brembo master cylinder up here. We've got Brembo brakes down at the wheel, and it feels so good. This thing stops on a dime, and it's helped by this bike's really light weight. Now, a great motor sound and great power delivery and great braking feel would mean nothing if the bike couldn't handle, and boy oh boy does this thing handle well. It's so light side to side, and the suspension is so composed around a corner, especially with my weight on there. I'm kind of surprised with how well it's just handling everything. The bumps in the road, the side-to-side motions. I would love the opportunity to take one of these to a racetrack. Holy cow. Oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. Wow. Oh, man. This is such a good motorcycle, man. It's so good. And I think one of the things that really helps the feel for me around a corner is how wide and flat the handlebars are. Like, okay, they're not much higher than on the RS660, but because they're wider, I get better control over the bike. It feels like I have to give less input to the handlebars to get the bike to go exactly where I want. And it's probably down to the fact that a lot of my formative sport bike years were spent on a supermoto, that I have this super affinity for really wide handlebars. I'm okay with the handlebar being another inch wider on this, honestly, I really am. Because I want to basically be here. I want as much control over this thing as possible. But this feel is so good out of the box. You know, every now and again I've come up with the idea of like, oh, what do I want to change on this bike? What do I want to change? On a twisty road, I want to change nothing. It's just that good. And with that being said, let's pull this bike over and have a quick conversation about the pros and the cons, as well as the specs on this bad boy, because there's actually a lot to talk about here. So let's dive on in.
Now, diving on into the specs on the RS right here, this thing is packing a 659cc parallel twin, which has just the most delicious exhaust note, especially once you put a pipe on these. And it's putting down 100 horsepower and a little over 50 foot-pounds of torque. Now, some of you will remember that when the Tuono first came out, it was making like 90 or 80 horsepower just to differentiate the SKUs a little bit. All of the research that I've been able to do says that these new versions of the Tuono are pushing 100 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque while weighing in at roughly 400 pounds wet and ready to ride, which is awesome. That is super, super lightweight for a bike making this much power. And it really helps it accelerate quite a bit, as you saw on the twisty roads. Now, mounting up on the RS660 here gives me a good opportunity to talk about the ergonomics. And I will say that the 660 platform is tight for me at like 6'3", 6'4" in my boots. It's a tight place to sit. Right here, I'm just barely able to fit comfortably under the tank wings here. If I was any taller, this would be a stretch. Also, right back here where the seat meets this cowl deal, the passenger seat, where, you know, you can get the cowl replacement on the factory and all that stuff. Right here, I get just pressure constantly on my tailbone. It's very tight forward and backward. So I would suggest, if you're taller than me, that you look elsewhere. If you're shorter than me though, literally perfect. And I know I'm on the top end of riders out there, especially when we talk about size and weight. However, the rest of the riding position is awesome. I love the bend in my knees. It's very comfortable, and the reach to the handlebars is awesome. It's sporty without being too aggressive. I'm not putting my weight on my wrists. All of my weight is kind of on the seat and on my feet, which is where I like to keep it when I'm riding. Very limited complaints, which gives me a good opportunity to start talking about the pros and the cons. And the first con, I gotta say, is it is a bit tight. If you're too much bigger than me, this does not work for you. It just won't. Another con, the transmission on here, it's Italian. It's very hard for me to find neutral sometimes on this. When we were riding this, me and Ben were on the RS660. We both struggled to get it into neutral, and I'm struggling to find neutral on this guy. But that's a small issue, it really is, because everything else is just so damn good. The brake feel is great. The technology package on here, which we're gonna talk about more on the highway, I think is just in the sweet spot. Enough for you to have fun, but not enough for it to be intrusive. The handling, the looks of this thing, I can't get away from how good of a package this is. And not to mention, this thing only costs $10,500. It is so cheap. I'm gonna tell you a secret. You can get these for cheaper than that because people buy the RS. They don't buy the Tuono. This is like an open secret, and we're gonna talk about more on that in the wrap up, but this is such a great choice if you're trying to get out and buy an upgrade from your beginner bike. Just get this, just get this. But with that being said, let's get out on the highway and let's talk about how this thing fares on the big slab of American concrete.
Now, pulling away on the highway on the Tuono, the first thing that I want to say is this is almost everything that I need it to be on the highway. Almost. The only real negative that I've ever been able to find with this 660 platform is it's a little bit buzzy. I'm not gonna lie, the vibes through the handlebars are quite potent. I've felt this on the Tuareg, I've felt this on this bike, I've felt it on the RS660. It's largely down to the fact that it's a parallel twin, and parallel twins just generally are very vibrational motorcycles. The only downside to, I'm used to some handlebar vibration. Okay, cool. Handlebars vibrate, motorcycles vibrate. The only issue, you really do feel it in the foot pegs. Something about the foot peg setup, the way they're bolted to the frame, it's really pushing a ton of vibration into the foot pegs, which kind of sucks. It's a bit of a bummer to have that much vibration at your feet because my toes fall asleep. And I don't want my toes falling asleep. I want to be able to feel them. This bike has plenty of power to commute and get through traffic pretty darn easily. It's just, I just wish it didn't vibrate so much. It's not as bad as being on like a Sportster, where even on the highway, it's shaking your brain, but that's a lower frequency vibration. This bike vibrates at a very high frequency, and that bothers me. It makes it hard for me to recommend for a long haul. Like, let's say, for example, you're doing a 300-mile day trip out into the hills here in Texas. It would be a bit of a bummer doing it on this bike just because of how bad everything vibrates. If you're putting your weight, like your body weight, on the toes on your toes, like you're kind of supposed to on a bike like this, it's not comfortable. But everything else, it's super comfortable. It's a very laid back seating position, which is nice because sure, the RS660 is laid back. It's a very comfortable bike to sit on. This is even more comfortable. It takes all of the good from the RS660 and kind of doubles down on it. Everything that I like about the RS on the highway, its sort of easygoing ergonomic stance is improved by the addition of handlebars. Also, in my opinion, it makes more sense to be putting luggage on the back of this guy than on the RS. It looks a little bit more appropriate. So now that we're out on the highway, let's talk a little bit about the electronics that are on this thing. So I've talked about before how you got your ABS and you got traction control and that kind of thing, but you also have the cruise control. I think you got to be in 5th gear for it to turn on, and then you flip it over, and there you go, cruise control. This is such an awesome thing to have on a motorcycle, and you really would be surprised how quickly you come to rely on it, and it's great to just make this bike even easier to ride on the day-to-day. You also have your fully adjustable ride mode, so you can go into the menu and play around with all the different settings. So an individual, you can change everything to be exactly the way that you want it, and then you can go in and you can even adjust the commute mode and the dynamic so that you can tailor it to be your thing. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you can add the 6-axis IMU and the up and down quick shifter to this motorcycle despite not having it from the factory like I mentioned before. But honestly, the only thing that I see as a necessity, a must-have if you're doing some commuting, is the cruise control. Other than that, everything else is gravy. And when you combine the cruise control with the power on this bike, the general comfort of the riding position, and then you subtract the general buzziness of this motorcycle, you have a very appropriate bike for highway cruising. It can be a bit of a bummer the longer you're on it, but you know, if you're just poodling around going to work, this is a flashy way to get to work with a ton of power to get around all kinds of traffic. I give the the RS. I've done that so many times already. I will continue to do it. I give the Tuono 660 2 thumbs up on the highway. Now let's pull this bike over and answer some Discord questions about the 660 right here.
Diving on into the questions here from the Discord. If you would like to participate in these videos, click the link down in the description below. It's how you get access to the Patreon. It's how you can support the channel directly. You'll get early access to videos. You'll get behind the scenes looks. You'll get discounts on merch. All of that awesome stuff by clicking that link down in the description below. And let's dive on in with the first question from the Church of Round Headlights. Why is it so ugly? I will admit that in the yellow colorway, I don't love it as much as I do in the black colorway. They also have the new white ones out that have the red and the green on there. Oh, it's so good. I'm not a big fan of yellow stuff. And I know it's acid gold. It's definitely nanner yellow right here. I feel like I just went and they were like, okay, this is the banana, make this that. It just doesn't look particularly nice, shall we say. It doesn't look upmarket, that's what I mean. It doesn't look like an upmarket colorway. There's some like metal flake in the paint. It just doesn't get across how good this bike actually is. Whitney farted, that's Corgi. The Tuono 660 is the bolognese of Italian bikes. Kinda, yeah. I mean, spaghetti bolognese is an awesome dish that anyone can enjoy. This is an awesome dish that anyone can enjoy. This is a good one from Burger. Between the 660 and the V4, which would you personally choose and why? It would be the 660. The V4 is a vicious power plant. It makes so much unbridled, angry power that it becomes kind of hard to ride and enjoy. This is half of that. It has that same sort of aggressive energy, but it's not going to send you at warp speed into a bridge abutment and turn you into a pancake or a smear. This thing, it's fun to ride. It's not hard to ride. Morgel, do you find the stock suspension soft like it is for a lighter rider? I had to add some preload to the front and the rear, and he's only 185 pounds without gear. So I do know that the folks at AF1 set these suspensions up, so I haven't had any issues. I definitely do feel a lot of times when I get on a bike, because I'm heavier than the average rider, the rear squats a lot. So this bike is actually doing a decent job of compensating for my weight right out of the box, which is awesome. Or, well, however AF1 has to set up, which means that the stock suspension can be set up for somebody who weighs, you know, over 250 pounds with all their gear on. So here's a complicated one from Jaded. I think we've established that the RS660 isn't a loose bolt / fragile motorcycle that simply exists because of an Italian limelight, and then it's probably comparable to others in the class without too much to gripe about, and actually might be a good value. I would actually go ahead and say that the RS660 is the king of this particular category, but that's besides the point. Let's dive in. What is your sense on what the average owner will do with one in 2 to 3 years of ownership? Is it the kind of motorcycle that will retain its value and loyalty, or is it the kind that gets passed around from various stages of modification on Facebook Marketplace every couple of years until it ends up in a storage unit with no title? This is definitely a more attainable version of an Italian motorcycle for sure. So in that sense, you are gonna see some of these get completely clapped out. Totally see that. However, I don't think that they're going to end up in a dumpster. I don't think you're gonna see these just absolutely roached at the end of their lifespan. I think what you're gonna see is a lot of these end up being stripped down and turned into track bikes. After they get passed from owner to owner, they're gonna end up living a life totally stripped down with no lights on a racetrack until they get wadded up. But if you're the first owner or second owner of one of these, you can rest assured that you're gonna get years and years of great use out of this bike. It's not a bike you have for just a season, let's say that. This is so endlessly practical that if you wanted it to be, it could be your finisher bike. It could be your one and only street bike. It's good enough to take on a track, good enough to take on a twisty road, good enough to commute on the highway. And last up from Wes, have you had a chance to ride the RS660? Yes, it's actually why I'm doing this video right here. And if so, between it and the Tuono 660, which do you prefer and why? That right there gives us a good opportunity to head out on the road and start wrapping up my thoughts on the Tuono 660 right here.
Woo! Oh yeah, this is a good bike. This is a very good bike, but the question remains, RS660 or Tuono 660? And here's where I'd like to tell you a story. It's story time with Spike here at the end of this video, because one of my buddies, Abby, he just bought himself a Tuono 660. Why? Because he found a holdover, a model year holdover. It was a 2023 or 2022, I don't remember. It was a year old, brand new bike, sitting on the dealership showroom floor at AF1. And they wanted to sell him that motorcycle really bad. And so, for the price of the bike, he got his Tuono 660, and he got the 6-axis IMU and the quick shifter thrown in for free. Which means that functionally, he got a Tuono 660 factory for the price, which is, I think it's $13,000, maybe $12,500. He got that for the price of a base model Tuono. And that is a screaming deal. That's a screaming deal right there. That's one of the best deals you could ask for on a motorcycle. You're getting a 13 grand bike for, you know, 10.5. I'll do that any day of the week. And the question then becomes why? Why are there so many Tuonos that are just kind of going for cheap? Well, there's not a lot of differentiation between the SKUs with the RS660 and the Tuono 660 now. A lot of riders will look at the Tuono and they'll be like, that looks a lot like the RS660, and the RS660 is a sport bike, and if I want to look cool and look flashy, I'll just get the sport bike, right? So, I'll take the RS, thanks. Not realizing that this is functionally the same motorcycle for $2,000 less money. And that's why this is Aprilia's best kept open secret. Maybe even the motorcycling industry's best kept secret. You can find these for so cheap. Oh my God, you can find them for so cheap. And you're getting a phenomenal motorcycle. And okay, maybe you don't want to get the 6-axis IMU and the quick shifter and all that stuff. You just want the $10,000 motorcycle. Just get the $10,000 motorcycle, dude. You don't need a quick shifter on this thing. The transmission is good enough that you can just sort of auto blip your way through it. So, you know, we're going around the corner and yoink. It might be hard to find neutral on this bad boy, but quick shifting or clutchless shifting on this, it's super duper easy. The reality is that we motorcyclists, we like to think with our little brain in our pants, not the big brain in our helmets. And if you listen to the big brain in your helmet and not the little brain in your pants, and you get the Tuono 660 over the RS 660, you are getting 99% the same motorcycle with more street comforts for less money. Sure, maybe it doesn't look fully faired, and maybe you want clip-ons, and maybe this, and maybe that, but this is the better motorcycle, in my opinion. For the price, just get the Tuono 660, guys. Just this. Mo gooder. This mo better. This is basically like, you know, an R7 with some slap yo mamas on it. The R7's a good motorcycle, but, and, you know, it's like a plain ear of corn. You get some butter and some salt on an ear of corn, and it's good. But then you throw some slap yo mamas on there, or some Old Bay seasoning, and whew, buddy. Now we're talking about something real good, and this is that. This is an ear of corn with butter, salt, and some slap yo mamas on it, man. I can't believe more people don't buy this. I cannot believe it. Too many people are sleeping on this bike, dude. Get them while you can, because who knows, if they don't keep selling, maybe Aprilia might might get rid of the Tuono 660. And that would be a crying shame, because this is a good bike here, boys and girls. The 99% guys and 1% ladies out there. This is a great motorcycle. And with that, I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. A huge shout out to the folks at AF1 for lending me this bike right here. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.